All right, awesome. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Manual Safe Podcast. I'm excited because I've got two great guests today, Dave Vanz and Jeff Yenzer. I almost just called you Yenzer just because it's my habit. Um, but these two are probably some of the best people I know when it comes to the topic of workplace culture and community and just that entire aspect of like how do you grow a company and continue to maintain the kind of the healthy environment you started with, hopefully, and what kind of good foundations and things can you build. So I think we got some cool stuff to talk about. At some point, I'm gonna have to figure out if I can get like recorded outtakes of people like strumming to that music when it intros. Thanks again to Guille from Chromatic for that. I really do appreciate the fact that you created kind of our own little intro song here. So it's fantastic. Um, but yeah, I'll let you introduce yourself, Dave, because I know it's the first time you've been on here, and just want people to kind of get a feel for who you are.
Hey guys, my name's Dave Vanz. Am I speaking? I feel like I'm talking to the crowd or I'm talking to you, but so I'm a big advocate around culture and community and building strong connections with clients. I run a company called Soweo that focuses on brand humanization, and it's all about intentionally taking the soul of a brand and connecting it to the culture, which effectively reaches out to the clients and community.
Awesome. And then Jeff is my resident HR fractional expert, but I'll let you kick it off as well.
Oh, I get to kick it off too. Okay. Jeff Yenzer. Most people, as the little thing here somewhere says Yenzer, just because that's easier. But I run Yenzer Consulting Services, LLC. We're going into our 8th year. I say we as the royal because it is just me. But I do fractionalized human resources consulting, personnel operations consulting. So really teaching businesses how to scale up from their initial people to their initial hires, all the way up to what will hopefully be a fully fledged small, medium, and then one day maybe even large size business.
Awesome. So I kind of just wanted to kick it off with when someone uses the phrase company culture, what does that even mean? And I'll let either one of you jump in.
So, hold on one second. I'm going to pull up because I thought this was actually kind of funny. When I first started looking at culture, I was like, well, how does the dictionary define culture, right? And it says, so there's two of them, and I go with the actual opposite one. So the other one is the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. And then I looked down, and the next definition was maintain tissue, cells, bacteria, etc., in conditions suitable for growth. And that's the one that I align with, because to me, it's a culture of people. It's the inside, right? Again, I go into brand humanization. I look at brands like a human, right? Humans, brands now engage with people on a daily basis. It's far different than the billboard advertisements you drove by. Now, every day, a brand has to somehow engage with people and be interesting every single day in order to maintain those connections. So to me, a brand has become more humanized in general. So without a good, healthy internal organs, tissues, cells, bacteria, all the little inner makings of that brand, to me, it's the healthiness of that, I like to call cultural fitness of that. And that builds the condition for the brand to grow and continue to expand.
Right on.
That's a very good one. I like that.
Yeah, I didn't expect to go back to like high school science class in a petri
Come
dish,
on now.
it definitely makes sense because when you have the right components, it's a lot easier to foster growth.
Yes.
And a lot of times when we use the term company culture, that's a lot of what we're talking about is how do we maintain a healthy company, because the company is more than just, the physical entity or, the paperwork. It's the living, breathing people inside it that make it move. So that it's definitely interesting. I don't think I'd ever thought of it from the petri dish perspective. So when we're talking about building culture, what are some of the first things you can do to kind of put those proper building blocks in place?
I would always tell a company, because culture starts with the first person. So if you have a great idea for an app or something, and I mean, naturally you're a CEO. That's just how it works, right? Like you've gone to CEO school and you know exactly what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to hire your first people. And culture has to be something that not only is created as a foundation, but also as you begin those first hires through your 10th, your 20th, your 50th hire, you have to continue looking at it. You have to continue realizing and building what that actually looks like, because it's going to change. If you try to have this set in stone, it has been chiseled into marble and we will never change it, you're going to ultimately fail long before you are ever even thinking about a brand, because you're not going to be able to have people in your own company that can actually agree on what things are supposed to look like and how they're happy. And especially as a leader, the things that you actually, that make you happy, but also the boundaries that you are going to create as you hire those new people. Rules are going to change. They're going to have to be malleable. They're going to have to be adaptive. And you can't just think that I thought of my culture on day 10 and that's how it's going to be on year 10.
Honestly, I'm digging your petri dish analogy even more now, because instead of going back to the kind of archaic principles that our forefathers brought us, in the historical artifacts kind of definition of culture, right, this whole definition of an evolving petri dish actually makes a little more sense, because we're just so early on typically, especially with the businesses that I feel like the three of us interact with on a fairly frequent basis. Yeah. These are not, businesses that started when the rail industry started in America. These are much, much more modern, much more new, and they're dealing with a lot of more nuanced problems anymore. We live in a world that is very Zoom forward now. I don't actually even see people necessarily on a weekly basis unless I make an extended effort to do so myself. I work from home. I could honestly live here and be very content most days without ever leaving. So you have to almost put those intentional kind of guardrails on yourself to kind of continue to have that sense of community. And that's something I was curious about. So how important is that sense of community for not only for the business itself, but for the team members that make that business?
So community is interesting. In what I do, I focus on 3 C's: culture, clients, community, right? When I think of community, you can lump in the culture into that community. They participate in it. But when I think of like, what does a brand do when it connects with its community? There's a few things that I think people overlook. One are voyeurs, people who are watching with never engaging. The world is full of them. I can't tell you how many times I go back to my hometown of Detroit, having not seen someone in 15 years. And it's they scarily tell me everything they know about my life, and I have not seen them engage or connect. So never underestimate the power of a voyeur, and understanding like everything that you put out is starting to develop some sort of image in that person. But your community to me, outside of your company walls, or remote or not, is they're your future employees, they're your future clients. And here's a wild one and no one ever thinks about, is they're a potential referral even if they've never used your business. And so when I ask people this question, I'll ask you guys, if money was no object and I told you I wanted to buy a sexy car, something that was fast, sexy, just awesome, money's no object, what would you guys tell me I should get?
I'm not necessarily a big car guy. I drive a Honda Accord because it's reasonable, but I would probably have to go with something from Drive for Survive, like one of the crazy McLarens or something. All right. Or go with a Bond car like an Aston Martin.
Ooh, love it. Have you ever owned one?
I never will.
So that point right there is, we respond to things we engage with that we experience in various ways. And so if a brand itself is in the community, there's an opportunity that your engagement as a brand in your community and how you're perceived, that emotion that you create with people, can impact your company in many different ways. So when I think of community, I think of just anybody that's within earshot, visual sight, that sees what you're doing, has an opportunity to engage or just see what's happening and actually have an opportunity to respond in their own way, whatever that is.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's kind of a bumpy explanation, but
but it makes sense because
complete sense.
you look at something like Drive to Survive and what it did for Formula One during the pandemic, and it largely brought a sport that was mostly European to America and had America engage with it, despite the fact that, again, there's no Americans really that are competing on a high level. And there's no, there is an American team, quote unquote, but again, it's getting smoked every year. So, it's just one of those things where it's like it managed to, like you said, build up that semblance of community. And again, where would I have come up with a McLaren and otherwise? It's probably from watching that and talking to some people I know that are engaged with that community a little more heavily than me. Otherwise, again, like I'd be going back to Sean Connery and old school Aston Martin type stuff. I just remember when they first used a Ford in the Bond movies and it was a giant, temper tantrum. Like, what the hell,
But it's also that point that was made in memes years ago. But, have you ever seen a Ferrari commercial, an Aston Martin commercial? Have you ever seen any of those like top of mind brands that sell amazingly well and sell for a huge dollar amount? Mm-hmm. But it's not a marketing aspect. Yeah. It's purely word of mouth. It's purely asserting yourself into an industry as the leader of that industry.
Well, and that's super interesting you say that, because that's a conversation that I think Dave and I have all the time. Because I'll mention something like a marketing funnel, and he's always just like, no, people have funnel blindness at this point.
No. Because my quote, say it right now.
Go for it. You can
funnels drain, they don't retain.
Yeah.
So like they have a hole at the bottom of them, and the focus is always about filling it. And for me, it's like, give me the things that fall out of the bottom of it. Like funnels are gimmicky. Everyone knows when they're walking into one nowadays. Like, this isn't new. We've been around them long enough. You know that, hey, did you want this PDF? Download this thing. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying they don't work, but that's not where you're going to build that brand equity with your audience.
Oh, clearly they work, or people wouldn't do it. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it is definitely the low effort way to kind of engage with people and try to get them to respond back to you, for sure. And some of that more organic content that genuinely kind of puts you in as an expert in a field, or makes it clear that you are a member of a community. For me, for example, that's been one of the strongest points I've had, and I've had other attorneys even tell me this, that they're jealous of the fact that I am so organically embedded within the community that I serve, in the sense of that they just don't see how they could similarly do something, because again, I was a Twitch streamer who works with Twitch streamers now. I was heavily involved with, following esports and stuff for, since it kind of started, back in the early MLG, game battles kind of days, even before we even ended up with what we have now, back when the bigger games were, again, still, well, I guess CS is still around, it's one of the ones
never going away,
but StarCraft, and stuff like that, and it's just cool to be able to be, kind of like that. And again, that is difficult to build. You can't just one day say like, I'm going to be part of a community, and then no, you have to like wake up every single day and like try to do it. It's right. A lot more proactive.
I think I'm a big fan of how you do what you do, man. I've watched you over the last year and a half, 2 years. Just like how you engage, you truly embrace. You're not going for the, hey, I'm gonna do this because it's gonna give me this huge return, and like that's the only reason why I'm doing it. You're actively taking a position in things that you're interested in. Mm-hmm. If it grows, that's awesome. You're not like just randomly choosing anything. I mean, there's specific reasons why you're choosing that, but you're doing it within a circle of your interests. You're doing it with things you genuinely care about, even if you weren't doing what you were doing. You're in the same circles, and so that is easy for you. I call it putting you in your place of authenticity. Mm-hmm. You live in your place of authenticity, where people get to experience your genius, and that has served you well. I've watched some of the companies that you've been involved with helping launch, and like I get a little jealous. I'm like, man, I want to be a part of that, especially that Detroit pizza one that you had going on.
Oh,
We got a box behind me somewhere over there with Grogu.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
No, I mean even that Detroit pizza brand. It came from a place of authenticity. Two Detroit guys that I know really missed pizza on the West Coast. That was what they grew up with, and that's where they came about with wanting to start that. I was lucky enough to have talked to Weigel 8 years ago when he first joked about trying to start it, and he and I have known each other since we were the two 18-year-old kids who couldn't get into bars at Microsoft events. So like, we go way back. And again, it's one of those things where, like you talked about it earlier, you never know who your future referral sources, your future friends, your future, anything are, But again, we engaged within the same community. We became friends through working on various things we worked on, including his charity where he, helped sick kids, with providing access to play in hospitals. And, I just thought that was an awesome concept. I never had an idea that I'd be like, hey, let's start up a pizza company. And he'd let me join, as like a minority partner on it, So for me, I think that's just incredibly dope that even something like that can organically come about, just from, again, just building those organic relationships,
and not only organic, but a big part of what I do, it's the genuineness of it. Maybe it's because I'm from Middle America and I've always been here, but in this part of the country, we take things a little bit slower. We don't feel this need to make millions in your second year. You're building incrementally toward a lifestyle that you want. I look to farming communities and things of that nature. I've known farmers throughout the years. My grandfather was a farmer, and you would see these older men that you didn't know it when you were a kid, but a combine costs, even back in the 80s, $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
$300K. So this is something that they just buy because it is a part and parcel of what they do. But they're dressed in overalls. They're eating, a home cooked meal, just enjoying life. They're hanging out, after they've done their work in the morning, they're hanging out, getting coffee together. Like that is their end game for their life, and they're happy. Whereas if you are a small business owner and you're not understanding that you have to build it with this idea that you have to be genuine, and you do. It's that organic level of growth that you can't force. And it's so important to remember that as a business, that yes, of course you want to grow as fast as you can, but the more you do of that, and it's just a forced thing, especially when it comes to the people you hire and maintaining your personnel culture, your culture, your internal culture. It's so important to take it incrementally and go with the flow. It's a relationship. More than anything else. And that's a lot of the times when I consult with my clients, I get them to understand that so many interactions that you have with your employees are going to feel like romantic relationships you've had that were healthy. And if you can continue to kind of look at it through that lens, you're going to naturally build the empathy that you need. You're going to naturally understand where they're coming from. You're going to be an excellent leader because you care about the people that you're leading, instead of just getting everybody to march to the beat of your drum and trying to wave the flag the hardest in the company because, well, of course you're the C-suite and that's what you have to do. There's nothing genuine about that. It's creating those organic relationships and those genuine relationships that mean so much.
Yeah, we're definitely going to jump back to the word empathy in a little bit. But one of the things I do love about talking with you, Jeff, is you have that perspective of having worked with Silicon Valley type startups that are, again, chasing the rocket ship while also going to, the meat and potatoes, which honestly equates to the majority of businesses in the world, which are, again, just trying to build a good living for themselves and their employees. And again, there's so much potential, especially with just modern internet revelations, to take over some of these older businesses that were run by, let's just call them boomers for this example, again, who haven't necessarily modernized and figured out how to use TikTok or Instagram or even potentially set up a website or, maybe use virtual assistants to be able to answer their phones and other things, all these different modernizations that can come around. And I think it's super cool just looking into those types of businesses. I had a 3-month fascination with HVAC. I don't know why. I just was obsessed with the idea of it because, again, just the more I looked into it, I'm like, it's always going to be around. It's always going to be needed. I have a lawyer buddy who tells me all the time, he's like, man, if I could redo my life, I would have become a plumber. He's like, that guy makes as much money as I do, works better hours than I do, fishes more than I do, and enjoys his life more than I do. And that's what I kind of remind him. I'm like, dude, just go work at Costco or something then, because again, you can get the hours you want, you get the benefits. And
not to mention the free samples of it.
Well, and he's a double income household. He's like, he doesn't need the lawyer stress. And it's like, the legal industry is one of the weirdest things in the world to me, because when you graduate law school, you assume you're immediately going to make a ton of money. And then you realize that like the entire industry is split into two camps. The people who are making between 45 to maybe 70, and the people that are making 250 plus. And there really isn't much in the middle until you've had time out of law school to actually build up enough experience to kind of get into that upper camp without, starting there, because it's just so weird. I remember being as, college student and just being told, hey, go be a lawyer, go be a doctor. There's tons of money there. And I'm like, man, if I just looked into something like plumbing or HVAC when I was younger and just become an expert at it and just run it like a good business, man, I would have started 7 years earlier. My earning potential would have kicked in immediately, and it would have gone straight into stock and stuff. Yep. And, I would have had to wait to kind of pause my life to get to where I was. I'm lucky that I'm one of those attorneys that actually likes what I do. There's maybe 4 of us in existence. I haven't met all 4 yet. It's probably like, I think it would be like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse if we all ended up in the same room. So I'm just hoping it never happens.
If there's 4 people that love HR in this planet, and I'm one of them, I don't even give it a 4 horsemen thing. I think it's just myself and one other poor soul.
I can see a podcast opening up called The Happy Attorney, and just
there's probably room for it. But no, I want to kick back to that word empathy a little bit though, because from my perspective, and people ask me this all the time, like especially when they're debating investing in a company, or they're like, what should we be looking for in a founder? And anymore, the word for me is empathy, because everything else I feel like you can teach. Empathy is one of those things where, yes, you can learn it, but it's a hell of a lot easier if you naturally have it.
It's also something that's very hard to have. Like, people will have it in their personal life when it doesn't involve the money that they take to survive. It's very easy to be empathetic when you're comfortable. It becomes increasingly harder to be empathetic when there's fire to your feet. And that's where you're really trying to find those people that are going to stay empathetic even when they are faced with hardship or someone else's hardship, and trying to navigate that when someone else's hardship directly affects you or your bottom line. That's really where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I was actually really curious about. So we're in a very uncertain economic time right now to begin with. And a lot of companies are having to navigate whether they're doing layoffs or maybe asking people to work overtime a little bit, without paying for it, especially if they're salaried and exempt and all that. Right. Various other things like that. How can you handle that kind of situation well as a leader and let your team understand what's happening without necessarily panicking them or, again, being too exploitive,
I think you approach it by taking your income, doubling it, and buying a $200 million home in the midst of layoffs.
Yeah. Every time.
But how often does that happen? Where you see people live out a lavish lifestyle, and they don't change, but they're laying off people. And by no means do I feel like anyone should be telling anyone how to spend their money. Like, it's your money. You built this business. You can do whatever you want with it, right? You can watch it go under. You can watch it thrive. You can make bad choices. You can make good choices. That's this freedom in everything that we do. I'm not here to tell you one way or the other, but I can say that I don't personally feel comfortable when I had my team that I hired in my first marketing company. There was times where they made more than we did. I had a business partner. They made more than we did. As far as I looked at it like they were my kids and this was my family, and I had to, make sure that they were taken care of, because at the end of the day, they were part of the brand. I mean, they maybe didn't have the same responsibilities as me, or it was diluted, but they were part of it, right? And the excellence that we were putting out, they played a part in that. And so obviously you can't control the inevitable. You can't, like, if you're, you can't pay someone, there's that moment where you have to come to that reality and deal with something that, especially as someone who can be naturally empathetic, it's hard, right? Having that ability to go, I have to make hard decisions, right? But to make those decisions while at the same time not giving up anything that you have, it's just that immediately to me shows a reflection of where your head's at. But again, I mean, that's me. If I were to run it, like I couldn't do those things. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So to me, is before that even happens, I think put yourself in check and ask yourself, are you doing everything that it takes to make sure that you can continue growing the company or sustaining what you currently have?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you come at it in a different direction even than I do, because so often the clients that take me on, especially my tech clients, they hate the fact that I am the person that slows them down. It's like, no, we need to think about this higher. We need to think about, what you are actually going to provide this person. You can't play games with people's lives. If you're bringing them on and telling them that they're going to come to a company that's going to be so much better than the place they're in and going to take care of them for years, then you have to make that promise and you have to find a way to make sure that happens. I'm constantly telling clients to really not listen to their board a lot of the times. Because their board will tell them hire everybody and then fire everybody without caring about the lives that they're impacting. And when you're facing when you're looking at those numbers dwindling, you as a leader, you have to be transparent. And if you can be transparent and humble and have that humility of, hey, we're going to try to get through this together. And if we can't make it, then we can't make it. But if they know the process and they know the journey that's happening along the way, then most of the time, if you have built a good team, not even a great team, if you built a good team, they're going to increase their own work to make sure that everybody can rise with them. But if you're sitting there in your $20 million house and everything's taken care of for you, why do you think people are just going to stick around? I hate the term quiet quitting, but at the same time, why would you ever expect someone, when they see how much better off you are and they go one for one on how much knowledge you actually have versus how much knowledge they have? It's human nature for them to want better or want different. So you have to come in. If you're if you're this CEO that had a great idea, and if you, heaven forbid, if you came straight from college, you haven't really worked as a leader before, and you are talking to people that are 15, 20 years into their career, you have to admit that you're a child. Like your experience just isn't there. And you have to lean on them as experts, and you have to trust them as experts, and you have to pay and take care of them as experts. And I think, to your point, it's like having children. It's like having pets. You can't just, grab these resources and, say that they're people until they don't work for you, or they aren't working at the level that you want. You have to coach them. You have to lead them. And if you're not going to do that, you shouldn't be in business. And I think that there are a lot of people that just shouldn't start businesses.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that last part. Because I think there's definitely a push to, especially among people who are entrepreneurs, to be like, everyone should be an entrepreneur. Look how much greater it is. And then they don't like to highlight the sleepless nights, the fact that you're stressed out because you need to make sure you can feed your team before you even worry about yourself necessarily. There's reasons why I've intentionally grown slowly. Like I could have added 5 or 6 staff like some of the other firms I've seen out there have done. But again, they're grabbing entry level law clerks and basically paying them peanuts and, again, just churning. And I don't like that concept. Like that's just not the culture I want to build for me. I
We
don't
we
want the
talked about
churn
it.
and burn.
Yeah.
And yeah, you and I have actually had one of the things I love about talking with you in particular is you're just kind of like, why do you even need to make more money? And I'm just like, he's right, a lot of times, because there's that old kind of analogy you told me about, like the businessman who walks up to the fisherman and he says, like, you could sell those. And he's like, but why? He's like, but then you'd make more money. He's like, but why? But then you could hire people to sell them too. And you'd make even more money. He's like, why? Well, eventually you could fish. He's like, that's what I do now. It's just like, why do you necessarily need it sometimes? Every
Right.
once in a while, you got to remember work-life balance is
Mhm.
a beautiful thing, and that's where, I've even put constraints on myself to be like, okay, I need to grow slower to make sure I can maintain the level of client contact and
Mhm.
quality I want, but also to make sure I'm not just killing myself to,
Yeah.
take on extra cash that I may or may not actually need, at times,
Yeah.
and especially in the hustle porn culture of LinkedIn, it gets very difficult to say, no, I think I should pause right now and maybe take a couple days off instead of grind into oblivion,
Yeah. When I started my business, and we've talked about it before, my goal was only ever to make more money than working for someone else. I want to
Yeah.
make more money for myself, even if it was a dollar for dollar. If I could make as much money as the highest paid job I'd had up to that point, a corporate HR job, a strategic executive level HR job. If I could make that money and only do it for myself, then that's fine. And I remember when you were first starting out, and it sounded crazy when I told you I'll never hire anybody.
Yeah.
Ever. I'm a
Yeah.
one-person consultancy and only ever will be, because I want to be able to fire a bad client and not worry about keeping food on someone else's table.
Yeah.
I get to maintain my ethics. That's not for everybody. A one-person consultancy isn't for everybody. You want to build a business, but you have to still look at it as you're building a lifestyle at the end of the day. And if you want to add more people to it, then you're building their lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But you shouldn't look at that lifestyle as, rap videos or Dubai parties and all of that sort of thing. No one needs that.
Yeah.
You can be very, very happy and very, very content and not need to make millions and millions of dollars.
No, for
And
sure.
Sometimes that just means they have to get in touch with what matters most to them.
Correct.
Not being told, if you're chasing this lifestyle, oftentimes it's, why are you chasing it? Why is this
Mhm.
going to make you happy? It's really getting down to that human element of who they are and figuring out, like, what is it? What is that thing that makes you happy?
Yeah. And what's that thing that keeps you happy?
But I think they're oftentimes influenced by outside forces without
Mhm.
even realizing it, that causes them to think that those are the things that are going to be the it factor for them.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. And normally I don't love the analogy of calling your coworkers family, because I think that is just a term that gets manipulated. And I know both of you fully understand what I'm saying with that. But I do very much resonate with the idea of, especially a startup is like a baby. And like, it needs to be babied. It needs a lot of nurturing, a lot of care, a lot of experts, a lot of people paying attention to it, because again, it doesn't have a job yet. It's not making money. It's just sitting there kind of wasting resources and crying a lot, trying to get attention, and as it gets a little bit more mature then down the road, then yeah, maybe it can mow the yard and do a couple basic things and occasionally, but again, it still needs guidance from people who've been there and have been down that path. And I think that's one of the biggest things I think I see people struggle with, is a lot of times they don't want to take advice because either they think, okay, I'm an expert. I know my area better than anybody else, without even really understanding that so much of this is just ubiquitous basic business, mistakes that we've all made, and sometimes it's so much better to be able to learn. I would argue it's always better to be able to learn from someone else's mistakes than your own, it's unfortunate when it's those rare instances of like, don't touch the stovetop when it's red, it's hot. And you're like, well, I still got to do it to find out,
Hell yeah.
Those
my
are
daughter has
the
that.
best teachers on the
That's
planet, but it's because it hurt.
Oh, if I could only learn from other people more often than I do from my own fire. But you know what? that wisdom sits inside right here,
Yes, it does. But I
So
think, in your point about, thinking about your company as family, which makes us all recoil. I will say that you should, I'll say it again, you should care about every employee as much as you do your significant other in a healthy relationship. Like that's the level of just compassion that you need to have for other people. In the same way that, if your significant other's having a bad day and you kind of pause yourself and try to help them, you need to do that for your employees. A lot of the time, the services that I provide, it's this weird ancillary service that I never thought that it was going to be a thing when I started this company. But it's just literally giving employees from the top down somebody that they can talk to about work or about even their personal life. I'm not a licensed therapist, but I'll sit there and I'll listen. And I know enough about their company that I'm not just a random person on the street, I'm not, their significant other who is going to feel burdened about having to listen about work crap all the time. They can sit back and actually talk about things with somebody who's not going to immediately go and talk to someone else in the company, because I am an outside resource.
Yeah, I'll flip that script a little bit. On the family piece of it, I use family obviously because when I looked at my employees, it was just looking at them like I'm responsible for their, being able to put food on the table, right? Just like you would a family. I interviewed this guy. He's a friend of mine. Worked with him in the past. Incredible culture builder. His name's Brett Young, and when I interviewed him, we were on camera, and I said, so company culture, team versus family, we started talking about what is it? And he goes, I don't, and I agree with him. It's not family, it's a team. Mm-hmm. A family, if something goes wrong, right? At the end of the day, you're still family. Like you can't put a stop to that. You can fire someone, but if they're your brother, they're still your brother, right? Mm-hmm. And so with your team, like it's a completely different mindset. You have to be a contributor. You have to step up and you need to play a part of this team. You can't sit back and be like, oh, but we're family. So there's the idea of looking at caring for your employees and being empathetic, but there's also the responsibility on them as a team member in the overall goal of the organization to participate and bring their best foot forward. I think as an owner, as a leader, I think it's you putting them in those positions where they can thrive, where they can be who they are. Because to me, it's beyond the skill set. Just like your clients, it should go beyond the transaction. It's beyond the skill set. Each person that's inside your company has a unique set of gifts and characteristics about them that make them different than anybody else that you hire. And that's why I think people are the greatest asset to every organization. I walk into places and I just assume you have a good product or service, otherwise I wouldn't be there. But to me, it's the people inside that if I position two people next to each other and they're competitors, they're both going to argue with me about who's better. Right. But the one thing that the one doesn't have over the other is their people. Mm-hmm. And you can't change that. Well, sure, you can take one member, bring them over here and like steal them, and bring them over to your company. But at the end of the day, if you're creating a good culture where people feel like they can be themselves while also participating and they see these victories and they see their growth, it becomes a lot harder to like for someone to leave. You're going to see retention start increasing. So to me, the team aspect is that participant and still being empathetic to them like you would if it was a family member, but also looking at it like, hey, you're here for a reason. We want you a part of this. We're a team, that's to me, that's the two differences between team and family.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I remember hating like group projects, especially in high school and college, but honestly, like team sports and any kind of team activity, even if it's like band or drama, it doesn't really matter.
Sure.
Anything where you have to rely on somebody else, it really teaches you to understand the concept of like process driven versus result driven thought. Because again, okay, the quarterback throws the ball to the receiver and he drops it. Well, you can yell at the guy for dropping it, but why did he drop it? Like, what did he do wrong? What is the thing that's going to fix the problem moving forward? Was he not looking? Was the ball thrown early? Did he use one hand instead of two? Like, there's so many basic things. And then when you start framing I mean, sports is just an easy analogy for me, but even within business, if you just start framing like what caused the ball to get dropped metaphorically, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to not come in and say it was Dave's fault. It's more of
Yeah.
like, well, there's this process that we have that's not very effective. Let's fix it and update it and move forward. And I think that's probably been one of the things that helped me most in life, was kind of starting to look at things like that instead of coming into the room and just immediately wanting to blame, whoever it is who quote unquote didn't do what they should have done. It made it so much easier to just look at the situation and say, oh, well, here's what we just need to fix, and then it makes a collective we and not a you versus me thing.
And how do we do that if I'm the one out there running and I miss the ball, right? And you come to me and you go, you bleepity bleep, like, how could you like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you attack me in that. This is what you need to do. You just crushed me. Sure,
Yeah.
you've given me, okay, yeah, I taught him how to do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but you just destroyed his energy. You just killed his spirit. And now you are expecting him to perform at this high level. So there's a lot of moving parts in it. And when you value humans and you put them in their positions of genius, their positions
Mm-hmm.
of power, and it becomes more like they're more likely to want to learn. They're more likely to want to try harder. They're more likely to want to be there early or stay a little later even. Because they start feeling like this is more than just a job. There's Gary Vee will say often that don't expect your employees to have the same passion for your company as
you do.
And I'm like, okay, that makes sense, but I also don't agree with that. It's not about the same passion. The owner, their passion is the entire company because they own the company, right? But to me, the employees, they have ownership as well. They own their role. They own that role. And so if you can help connect those passions to that role, I think you start seeing some of that entrepreneurial mindset, if it's there, that they start connecting with it, and then you see that energy come out of it.
Yeah.
I definitely think that's important to maintain and retain like high-end talent like that by giving them a sense of ownership. Because without that, I think especially your high achievement people, they either eventually will get bored because they won't feel like they have any ownership or control, and they'll go somewhere where they feel like they do. Or, sometimes you can accidentally overgive them too much work to the point that they just feel like they're now a cog in a machine and not getting to do any of the quote unquote fun or strategic tasks.
I want to wrap back around to your sports analogy, actually, because while you were talking about it, I had this thought. Anyone can be a leader of a professional team.
Yep.
Anybody can be that. But there's always going to be trades. There's always going to be all of these factors. What you should really rather try to be is a leader of a successful high school or college team. Because those people are naturally going to want to stay there a little bit longer. You have them for a little bit longer. And you need to make them think of those years as their most formative.
Yeah.
But if you continue to think about things like a professional sports team where, I'll get the best resources and then I'll move them on and off they'll go, you're never going to get as much out of those people as I think they could have provided. Not that you could have gotten out of them, but they could have provided, because it always just felt like it was a stepping stone.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Unfortunately, college has turned into basically the same thing anymore because everybody can jump and chase the bag of cash. I think
but
I've
high
got
school, like when you were
my
looking
mission control mug back there for the UCF NIL.
Oh my God,
Space U.
It breaks my heart. But if you think of team building for a high school team, I mean, those people are trying to do their best work for 4 years.
Yep.
Because they want to either create a legacy there because they might never play again. Those high school people may never play again. Or they are trying to build something more.
Yeah.
So I think as a leader, if you look at it in that way, I think that you're going to come at it from the right direction.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I've kind of always come at it from a little bit of a a Moneyball perspective too. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah.
that concept or term, or kind of Oakland versus the New York Yankees, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Oakland is one of the smaller market teams in baseball, has some of the lowest budgets in baseball, and has been fairly successful at least making the playoffs in general, or putting out a somewhat competitive product.
Yeah.
Maybe not the last couple of years, but in general. Whereas the Yankees are the team that you're talking about, who just buy anything they can afford.
Sure.
They just throw the most expensive stuff in the room and just hope that it works. And yeah, sometimes it does. But the beautiful thing about, and the reason why I think I like baseball more than, say, something like basketball, is because one player cannot dominate in baseball. Doesn't matter if you're the best pitcher, and this is probably the best position to do it. The best pitcher in the game is not going to throw a no hitter every time. It's impossible, So even if you win in general 20 games in a season, there's 160 games that need to get played.
Sure.
So you won your 20. Cool. That's awesome. You did really good, but like that's awesome, but you're still going to need a lot of help. And that's why I love baseball so much in general is, yeah, it can be slow. It can be boring, but you have to rely on every single person to get up there and do their job. And sometimes the job is the least sexy thing in the world. There's a guy who gets paid to just go up there and run from first to second base and then get pulled, again, the next time he's up. There's a guy that literally will come in and half the time just bunt or, do some kind of, just really crappy chop over the second baseman's head kind of thing, and it's just like, is that sexy? No. And I mean, I think that's even why I like a lot of esports. I like competitive games like League of Legends, where, there are support roles. And in those support roles, they may not have the flashy stats. They may not look like they did everything, but maybe they zoned half the team away and suddenly, the person who's supposed to be the carry gets to be the carry,
Yeah.
And to me, that's always been super fun, is to be in that position to facilitate letting others feel like they're the superhero all of a sudden, and like that can happen in business too,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, my biggest judgment of my clients, and they'll all say it, is I will immediately look at their highest paid non-executive role and their lowest paid administration role and see what the disparity is there. Because when you talk about support,
Yep.
in business, there's a reason I started an HR business instead of staying in HR myself.
Yeah.
It is a thankless job, but it is the backbone of a company. How, if you are telling me that your company culture is this great and wonderful thing, and I am looking at somebody that you have no problems paying $45,000 a year when you are willing to pay someone $180,000 a year, and have those two people see each other on a regular basis. And in every case, having that person making $45,000 a year looking at the financials, because they're often in a payroll capacity, seeing that disparity. And you're going to tell me that your company culture is a great one. I'm going to tell you that there's a few rotten roots down there. You've got some root rot. You might not see it in the leaves yet.
I think this is something we see a lot in tech and games in particular, is that we like to pay our programmers and our technical leads and some of the more quote unquote math heavy roles a lot. And then, like you said, the payroll coordinator may be making $12 an hour.
Right.
And they may be literally the person who sees what everyone makes.
Absolutely.
And that person's not going to be quiet when they realize that Bob over there, who just took a 4-month sabbatical, is making $250 a year, whereas the entire art team added up is making about 180, and there's 10 of them, and it's just like, what is going on here? Not to mention, any of these quote unquote soft skill roles like HR and, legal sometimes even gets thrown in there, which blows my mind. It's like, these are essential roles that are provided by experts, and you want to put in your juniorest person half the time. The amount of times I've seen a community manager who, again, was treated as just the lowest level person to start, whether that's fair or not, suddenly be told they're in charge of HR is just mind-blowing to me, because I'm just like, okay, I understand that community and company culture are important, but they're oftentimes very separate on the whole, concept of compliance. There's a lot of different things that start to go into the role as you start to head more toward an HR position and less toward an external, focus on how do I kind of bring out the brand in a human way. One thing I do have a question for you guys is, for a remote business that feels like it's starting to struggle with connecting with its employees, what can it do that isn't kind of overreaching and taking it too far? Because I mean, I've heard of, I know even Guille mentioned it on one of the other episodes we did of this, where they went out and they went caroling to all their employees' houses. And to me, I was immediately like, that seems like a little bit of a stretch sometimes, on whether or not that's even kosher, to necessarily intrude on someone's home like that, but again, they kind of had permission, most of them, ahead of time. But it's one of those things where it's like, how do you balance trying to continue to keep that culture without giving people just mundane tasks now that they need to do on top of their actual job that start making them frustrated?
Dave, I'll let you lead that one.
Okay. No, this is something that I just got off a call at 1 with a student at USF, and we were just talking about remote, and it's one of the things that I'm very fascinated around in tackling. And I have one thing in particular. I don't have here's the solution, right? Here's the perfect little box. Here's the box that's going to work for everybody, and it's all going to be amazing. No one's ever showing up to the office
for
again.
$4.99. You could buy Dave Vanz ebook, and you got the answer.
If you click into my funnel right now, I will send you a PDF, which will then send you a link to download another one if you give me this. I'm
getting itchy. I'm getting really itchy.
It'll automatically send you a YouTube video that you can like and smash the follow button to.
Smash that follow button as I sell you on the next thing that you need to download for just $1 more. No, so I'm going to take this back. I think you got to understand, most of everything that I've gained through like how I see the world is through my own experiences, walking through my own fire, seeing like what I've seen work. And it doesn't necessarily mean I've had to go through the fire of building a remote culture. It's certain patterns of behavior that I see in people and how technology and business is moving. And so I love putting pieces together for ideas and creative ways. And one of the things that caught my attention was, let's see here, 15-ish years ago, my oldest son was about 4 or 5 years old. I played Halo with my brother in Seattle. He had never met him yet. My brother hadn't come to where we were living in Michigan. He hadn't come to visit yet. But my brother calls me up and he goes, if a family who plays together or kills together stays together. and I think funny comment. We laughed about it. And so I started giving my son the controller, and I said, okay, if you can figure out this controller, I would like leave him with a rocket launcher and like just go away. And I said, go find my guy. And he would sit there and, the head would be going up and down, left and right. But I'm like, you can't fire that rocket launcher unless you find me and shoot me. And so of course he would fire it and like he'd die and like respawn again. But he learned how to play, at which point I said, hey, why don't you play with me and my brother? Mm-hmm. And we started playing together, but he and my brother would partner up on a team and they would communicate. And I thought, this would be a cool way for him to get to know him. I watched their bond. One, I saw his talent growing, right? But it's kind of like people say that if you're blind, you have more sensitivity to what you hear and listen to, right? Sure. And vice versa. So without the ability to see my brother, they were forced to be in an environment where they had to communicate. And they both had a common mission together that they both bought into and said, okay, this is what we need. We need to beat this other team. We got to capture the flag and bring it over here. We need to go find this person. And so they started with this one mission in mind, the lighthouse, right, where they wanted to go. And they had to communicate together in order to win. Otherwise, if they didn't communicate, they'd get owned because, that's what I did. I would own them. Well, over the years, they became unstoppable. And a couple years later, my brother comes into town. And I watched my son run to the front door and jump into his arms and hug him in a way that I never see him do to my brother who lived 15 minutes away.
Right.
And it was that playful, mission-minded attitude where they were forced to communicate because they couldn't have all the luxuries of everything, right? Same thing with remote workforce.
Yep.
Fast forward, playing games myself and having fun with friends and whatnot. I began to, I thought for a second, I went, well, wouldn't it be cool if companies used gaming as a way to learn how to work together, learn how to communicate together? And then I thought, wait a minute, didn't companies used to have like bowling leagues and softball teams and stuff like that? Well, some people can't play softball. Esports, very inclusive. We know that the gaming industry is very attentive to creating controllers that people can use that may not be able to use a normal controller. So it's a very inclusive sport that doesn't require people to be all in the same location, that can create this sort of competitive atmosphere, but also the more immersive gaming has become, especially with VR, what an incredible opportunity to incorporate esports into companies where teams who work remotely can then use gaming as a way to bond, learn how to work together, communicate together outside of the daily tasks. And at the same time, what an amazing opportunity. So I like doing things that accomplish multiple things at once. Like it's great. You want to attract young talent? Become relevant to young talent.
Of course.
And what better way to become, even like for a company that may have been around for 100 years, to be relevant, to say, hey, we're launching an esports platform. Now imagine companies all around are doing that. And what an opportunity for me to say, I'd really like to work with John's company. And I know that like he and Yenzer work together. Like, you know what? Hey guys, I challenge you. My team versus your team. And now we've got this competition going on, and we're bonding through gaming, through competing, and getting our hearts broken, and like also experiencing victory. And we create this relationship, and all of a sudden, it's like I get a call from John that says, "Hey, I want you to come into the office, and I want you to bring brand humanization into my company. I want you to instill what you do in my everyday objectives and our organization's objectives." How did you guys meet? Yeah, people meet on the golf course all the time. Why can't they meet virtually playing a golf game?
I mean, I definitely think you can. I mean, I've played video games with plenty of my clients, and I definitely say some of my stronger relationships are, from dropping into the guy I was literally talking about just called me right now. Literally, I've dropped into Apex with one of my buddies, and he ended up being a groomsman at my wedding just because, again, we played so much video games with each other over a year and a half. And we all worked in the same building, but when I was trying to think of, okay, who would I pick? I'm like, well, there's the guy I play video games with every night. It was a little bit different than the people I hang out with once a week, so it's just like that was a given,
I think it's not the end all be all answer, but it's a component that I think companies should take a good look at and go, how do we embrace this to foster connection, foster teamwork, foster competitiveness amongst everyone that's remote?
Yeah. I think there's also, even on top of that, coming from a strategic executive side of things, there's this need when you are working with and running a remote organization where everyone wants the most efficient use of their time. Because if you are remote, you could be doing 100 other things at this very moment. So as a leader, you have to get to a place where you are creating agendas for meetings. And those people, you are being empathetic to other people's anxieties of, hey, you drop a meeting on somebody and then make them wait for 2 hours. They are sitting if they are sitting by themselves versus even sitting in a cube in what used to be an office space. They have so much more anxiety going into that. So if you give them the ability to see what the agenda is going to look like, to add to whatever they need, then the two of you are going to be able to have a more efficient meeting. It's going to take a 45-minute meeting down to a 15-minute meeting, maybe 20.
Yeah.
And that efficiency is going to be something that everyone in your organization is going to appreciate. And everyone is going to get into that mindset that I am making more money doing quote unquote less work, but honestly, it's just more direct and purposeful work than I would have been if we were all meeting up and just sitting around and, being able to walk by each other's offices or being able to sit at a water cooler.
Yeah.
I got a degree in interpersonal communication. It's important, but you can still foster those things in a remote environment if you are purposeful about it and if you really hone in to how people might be thinking about something. I tell my clients as well all the time, clients, their entire employees, if you can create a world where while you're at work, you do not use any emoticon ironically, then you are going to be able to just blaze and cut through so much miscommunication. If you have people utilizing those things to be able to say, this is the tone of the message that I'm sending, you don't have to try to read between the lines. I'm telling you this, and there's an actual smile on my face. I'm telling you this, and I'm annoyed. It cuts through all of the red tape and that makes remote work and a remote company so hard to manage.
I want to give people what you just said right there was so on point. I love that there was a post on LinkedIn. I really want to give this person credit, but I don't remember who the one that shared it. It said, start making this normal or something like that. Like start, make this a thing where it said, hey, need to meet with you at 2 p.m. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like that little last comment. And I went, oh, that's brilliant. Something so simple can set the person. Because, people could be on edge like, oh, crap, what did I do?
They will be on edge. They're going to be freaking out, thinking about other jobs.
Like, I better start interviewing, right? It's a good thing. Oh, man.
I've never been that person who gets that anxiety point, but I've also tried to be cognizant of it ever since I learned about it, of just never saying, hey, can we talk?
Yeah.
Because again, it's just like, it's so much easier to just say, hey, I need some help on X deal. Can you be available for 15 minutes? Then it's never oh shit, I'm getting fired,
Right.
Because even just me, I rarely talk to non-C-level employees at the companies I work with. So every once in a while, if I just happen to slack somebody, I got to remember that they're probably fearing for their life. Why is legal sending me a message? Because that rarely happens, especially when you have to be cognizant of it around a period of layoffs or, something similar. Because again, I just have to be very clear. It's like, hey, this is good. Before I even finish the rest of the message, I'm like, TLDR, this is good. Like.
Again, and I'll say it one last time, it's really thinking about that like a relationship. If your significant other sent you that message, how would you feel? Like if you had to work through the rest of your day and it's, we need to talk when you get home. What? I was in that marriage. I know what that feels like.
Dave's already driving home.
Yeah, exactly. You're taking off work.
I'm changing the locks. I don't know what you're talking about.
But you have to think about it like that for those employees and understand. And, here's another one of, if there are letters behind your name, if you're C-suite, if you're the CEO, it doesn't matter how nice you are, how much people love you. You ask for a one-on-one with one of your lower level employees and they think it's a bad thing. And they are freaked out every moment that they talk to you because you are the owner of the company. You just see it as a company. It's your baby. It's what you've built. But you're going to have, especially as you start to scale toward those 20, 30, 40 people, you're going to have people coming in that have no idea how you are as a person, have no idea how to interact with you. So be cognizant of that and be empathetic.
And let's put a stop to the people who do this because they actually enjoy a little of the anxiety that they put in there. There are people that operate out of that leadership. They love it because it puts you in a position of fear. And then and that's how they have been modeled, whether they think it's the right way or not. They've been modeled that behavior that we lead by making people fearful.
Right.
And that's something that, man, if I smell that when I go through my stage one of my process, that discovery phase of whether or not I want to work with you.
Yep.
If you operate out of this and I sense it, I've done it before. I've chosen people like that. Now it's a huge red flag.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't work in that because it's a complete devalue of the human that's involved, and my whole business is built around that value of humanizing and bringing more of that approach to how a brand
I have
engages.
other lawyers who ask me sometimes why I still do free consultations initially, and it's honestly because I want to know if I even want to work with you before I take your money.
Precisely.
That
Every
15
time.
minutes isn't for you. That 15
Nope.
minutes is for me. I'm looking for red
Yeah.
flags. I'm looking
Yeah.
for,
That's all.
okay, are you looking to use me as a weapon against your own team?
Yeah.
If
Am I
that's
going
the
to be
case,
your
that's a
attack
red
dog?
flag. You know,
Yeah.
are
Am
you
I-
looking to basically, fight everyone no matter what, whether it makes sense or not? Well, I'm probably not the attorney for you.
Nope.
Doesn't mean I don't fight when I need to. It doesn't mean I don't, represent as hard as possible when I need to. But there's a huge difference between that and the guy who comes in the room and says, we're always going to be the most aggressive. And it's just like, there are so many times that I have to tell people that you've already won the argument. Stop, like just take the win and leave, continuing to fight is not going to work the way you think it will.
It is. And I always challenge them with name me 3 Western world dictatorships that ended well. Give them to me. It doesn't tend to end well for the dictator. It's just maybe don't try to run your business like that.
All right. Well, I know we're like really at time, so I'm going to wrap this up. But do you guys have anything else you want to just kind of add before we go?
Dave,
Any last thoughts?
Did we go through all the questions?
I believe we did.
We hit on most everything.
The only one that we didn't necessarily hit on was how do you kind of protect your company culture as you scale? But I think we kind of swung by that one on a little bit of a sideway.
Grow that petri dish. You have to keep reassessing it. It is not something that you can just have forever.
Did we hit on the can you build? I know you said the question, like thinking of a solopreneur.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff, I think hit it because again, he started telling you from day one, you need to have that mentality. And again, kind of the way you treat yourself is how you're going to treat your first employee when you're a solopreneur, or solo entrepreneur, because again, just the way I look at myself and say, am I going to show myself grace today if I'm a little bit behind on some deadlines? Or am I going to go yell at myself and be like, work through the weekend and whatever, and again, that's how you're going to treat the next person.
And unless you can have a healthy relationship like that with yourself, I don't think that you're going to have that healthy relationship with that employee.
I don't think it's possible to have a healthy relationship with anybody until you have a healthy relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's something I tell my wife all the time because I'm like, you gotta like yourself before you can worry about anybody else,
But I think I don't know about you, Dave, but my final thing is just pay attention to your people. I had a client once that wrote, you cannot develop any software that solves people problems. You have to find somebody that can do it. Mm-hmm. And it was in praise of, I guess, what I did for their company. But it really resonated with me that, software isn't going to solve people problems. So you have to get in there, have the hard conversations, be anxious. But you chose to take on this crown. This wasn't a crown that was just given to you when you decided to start a business. You wanted this. So take the responsibility of it and take the responsibility of the people that are under you and bring them up to your level.
Yeah. And you can have all the great intentions. And I think I have a pretty good tie into that is every company is going to evolve over time. What you do to build a team of 10 is not going to be the same thing that you do to build a team of 20 and 40 and whatnot. And you can come into if you built your company from the ground up, you could have been I think most people value humans. I think at the end of the day, if you ask anybody, do you value the people that work? Of course I do. Of course I do. Right. And you can intentionally come in and it's easy to look at 5-10 people and have a pretty decent relationship with all of them to where, what gets them motivated or what things that they like or what's going on with them. Are they married? Do they have kids? And you can kind of keep tabs on all that stuff and really kind of work with them intimately to integrate them into the culture that you've built and continuing to build. But over time, the more people, and you change up your strategy, now I got to get to 20 people, I'm growing my business, is that it becomes a lot harder. And so making sure you have a humanized approach and thinking about going, okay, I've got 25 people, I've got 50 people. I can't sit here and walk around and develop, like, so it becomes more and more important to have these human data points where you understand how to integrate the culture and keep everyone in the entire culture engaged to some extent that fits them, and how they interact with the brand and whatnot. And so, that's what I love about this, is that talking about brand humanization in 2008, 2010, 2012 was kind of an empty chamber. Like no one talked about it, but I'm excited to see that companies are starting to realize that, hey, this is more than just about just making money. We've got to build a good culture. We've got to create something that, because it serves both sides. It serves the growth of the company, and it serves the internal culture and being a great place to work and attract new talent.
Absolutely.
So
attract and retain.
No, it makes perfect sense to me. And I think it's just one of those things when you decide you're going to be quote unquote CEO, you got to put that mantle on yourself.
Yep.
And you got to be willing to, lead and, honestly, a lot of times get into the dirty work yourself, and kind of, lead by example for these people, and you guys joked about it, but, if you're sitting there in a $20 million house, it's a hell of a lot harder to actually empathize with your team that's barely surviving and eating ramen,
Or expect them to
so
empathize
you
with
definitely have to, definitely have to be able to relate to them. And I mean, at least in my experience with both life and business, I don't think there's ever a point that it gets easy. When you're a kid, you're always like, oh man, once I'm in middle school, it's gonna be easy. Once I'm in high school, it's gonna be easy. Once I'm in college, it's gonna be easy. Once I'm an adult, once I have my own house, once I have, my own money, it's like, no, it never gets easier.
No, but you do go in reverse. Now you go in reverse. You're like, man, if I was only 15 again,
it's like, dude, if I was still an 8-year-old playing Tony Hawk, waiting to go to Olive Garden with my mom, I would be thrilled. Like that was the shit. You don't realize how good it was until you get older.
Well, I think we can all agree on one thing. It does get a little easier if you have the right people around you, and if you've got the right team. And they're in it with you, and they feel valued. It's a lot easier than to have a team that fears you, or doesn't feel connected to it.
And not to get too deep into just basic psychology here, but once you get the hierarchy of needs met, it makes it easier too.
It's true.
If you're not struggling to eat, if your team is not struggling to eat, if they know they have shelter, if they know they have all their basic stuff, it's a lot easier to start pushing towards self-actualization and fulfillment. Because again, you can't have a happy team until you're at least meeting them all their basic needs. They need to know that they have healthcare. They need to know that they make enough money to survive. They need to know that, again, their leader is going to protect them if something bad is coming their way.
Awesome, John. This was good, dude.
No,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate you guys' time, and later.
Yeah.